Maria Santos had always been good with numbers. As a senior clerk in the Defense Ministry's logistics department, she spent her days tracking supply shipments, ammunition orders, and troop movements across the small but strategically important nation of San Valdero. The work was routine, almost boring, but Maria took pride in her accuracy and attention to detail. On that humid Tuesday morning in September, Maria noticed something strange in the shipping manifests. General Ricardo Vega, the country's most decorated military leader, had authorized an unusual number of equipment transfers to the northern border. At first glance, it seemed normal. San Valdero had been experiencing tensions with its neighbor, and military preparations were expected. But Maria's trained eye caught inconsistencies that others might miss. The shipments included not just weapons and ammunition, but also communication equipment, medical supplies, and even personal vehicles. More puzzling was the timing. These transfers were happening during a period when the government had publicly announced a peace initiative with the neighboring country. Why would they be moving so much military equipment to the border when they were supposedly working toward peace? Maria pulled up the digital records on her computer, cross-referencing the orders with official military communications. Her security clearance gave her access to most logistics databases, though she rarely needed to look beyond her immediate responsibilities. As she dug deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. The equipment wasn't just being moved to the border. It was being positioned near specific crossing points that had been identified in intelligence reports as potential invasion routes. Her hands trembled slightly as she printed out the documents. General Vega had been her father's commanding officer years ago, and she had grown up hearing stories about his bravery and dedication to San Valdero. The idea that he might be involved in something treacherous seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right there in black and white. Maria decided to investigate further before jumping to conclusions. She stayed late that evening using her access codes to examine older records. What she found made her stomach turn. For the past 3 months, General Vega had been systematically positioning military assets along the northern border, but not in defensive positions. Instead, they were arranged in a way that would make it easy for an invading force to capture them quickly. The communication equipment particularly worried her. These weren't just radios. They were sophisticated systems that could be used to coordinate large-scale military operations. If an enemy force gained control of this equipment, they could effectively blind San Valdero's military communications network, making organized resistance nearly impossible. As Maria continued her research, she discovered something even more alarming. The general had requested detailed maps of San Valdero's defensive installations, civilian infrastructure, and government facilities. These requests had been approved through normal channels because of his high rank and security clearance. But when viewed together with the equipment transfers, they painted a picture of someone preparing to help an invasion force. The next day, Maria couldn't concentrate on her regular work. She kept thinking about what she had discovered and what it might mean. San Valdero was home to nearly 2 million people. If the country were invaded and conquered, thousands could die in the fighting. Even more would suffer under foreign occupation. During her lunch break, Maria walked to the small park near the ministry building. She needed fresh air and time to think. As she sat on a bench watching children play, she thought about her own family. Her elderly mother lived in a small apartment across town. Her brother was a teacher at the local elementary school. Her sister worked as a nurse at the main hospital. All of them would be in danger if the country were invaded. Maria realized she couldn't ignore what she had discovered, but she also couldn't be completely certain of her interpretation. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation for the general's activities. Maybe he was preparing for a different kind of military operation that she didn't understand. She decided she needed more evidence before taking any action. That evening, Maria returned to the ministry building under the pretense of catching up on paperwork. The security guard knew her well and didn't question her presence. Using her computer access, She began searching for any communications between General Vega and foreign officials. This was more difficult because such communications would be classified at a higher level than her usual clearance allowed. However, Maria had learned over the years that government computer systems often had gaps in their security protocols. She found that she could access some files by searching for keywords in document titles rather than trying to open classified folders directly. After hours of careful searching, she found references to meetings between General Vega and officials from Estanza, San Valdero's northern neighbor. The meeting notes were brief and carefully worded, but they revealed that these discussions had been taking place for months. More importantly, they had been happening in secret, outside of normal diplomatic channels. The government's public peace initiative with Estanza was apparently genuine, but General Vega had been conducting his own parallel negotiations. Maria printed the relevant documents and hid them in her personal bag. She was now certain that something was terribly wrong, but she still didn't have proof of exactly what the general was planning. She needed to find more concrete evidence of his intentions. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The next morning, Maria overheard two junior officers discussing General Vega's upcoming travel plans. He was scheduled to fly to the capital city of Estanza for what was officially described as a routine military liaison meeting. The flight was planned for the following week, and Maria noticed that the timing coincided with a major military exercise that would position most of San Valdero's forces away from the border. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. General Vega wasn't just planning to help an invasion, he was planning to defect to Estanza and provide them with real-time intelligence about San Valdero's military positions during the exercise. With their forces spread thin and their communications potentially compromised, San Valdero would be completely vulnerable to attack. Maria realized she had stumbled upon a plot that could result in the conquest of her entire country. The weight of this knowledge was overwhelming, but she knew she had to act. The question was how to stop a decorated general who had the trust of the government and access to state secrets. She spent the rest of the day formulating a plan. Simply reporting her suspicions to the general's superiors might not work. He had allies in high places, and without absolute proof, her accusations might be dismissed. Worse, if she was wrong, she could be charged with spreading false information about a military leader during a time of tension. Maria decided she needed to gather more evidence, and she needed help from someone she could trust completely. That evening, she called her cousin Elena, who worked as a journalist for one of the country's most respected newspapers. Elena had always been skeptical of authority and had a network of contacts throughout the government and military. When they met for coffee the next evening, Maria carefully explained what she had discovered. Elena listened intently, asking detailed questions about the evidence and its implications. As a journalist, she understood the importance of verifying facts before publication, but she also recognized the potential magnitude of what Maria had uncovered. Elena agreed to help investigate the story, but she warned Maria about the dangers they might face. If General Vega was indeed planning to betray the country, he would be desperate to prevent his plans from being exposed. Anyone who threatened to reveal his plot could be in serious personal danger. Despite the risks, both women knew they had a responsibility to act. The safety of their country and the lives of thousands of innocent people depended on preventing General Vega's betrayal. They began planning their next steps, knowing that time was running out and that one mistake could have catastrophic consequences for everyone they loved. Elena Martinez had built her reputation as a journalist by being thorough and fearless. When her cousin Maria brought her the shocking allegations about General Vega, Elena knew she needed to verify every detail before taking action. The next morning, she began making discreet inquiries among her contacts in the military and government. Her first call was to Captain Luis Herrera, a mid-level officer she had interviewed several times for previous articles. Luis had always been honest with her, even when it meant criticizing his own superiors. When Elena asked him about General Vega's recent activities, she could hear the hesitation in his voice. "There have been some unusual orders lately," Luis admitted during their phone conversation. "Nothing I can discuss officially, but some of us have been wondering about certain decisions coming from the general's office." "Why do you ask?" Elena couldn't reveal Maria's discovery yet, but she pressed for more information. Luis explained that many junior and mid-level officers had been confused by recent troop movements and equipment transfers. The official explanations didn't seem to match what they were seeing on the ground. Encouraged by this confirmation, Elena decided to investigate the general's background more thoroughly. She spent hours at the National Library researching old newspaper articles and military records. What she found was troubling. General Vega had been born in a region that now belonged to Estanza. His family had been displaced during a border dispute 20 years earlier, and he had harbored resentment about the loss of his ancestral lands. More concerning were recent changes in the general's financial situation. Elena discovered that he had been making large purchases and investments that seemed beyond what his military salary could support. He had bought expensive property, luxury vehicles, and had made significant deposits into foreign bank accounts. The money seemed to be coming from unknown sources. Meanwhile, Maria continued her own investigation at the Defense Ministry. She had identified the exact date of General Vega's planned flight to Estanza and learned that he would be carrying classified military documents as part of his official duties. These documents included detailed information about San Valdero's current military capabilities and defensive positions. Maria also discovered that the general had requested special authorization to bring additional personal luggage on his official flight. This was unusual for a routine liaison meeting and suggested he might be planning to stay in Estanza longer than officially announced. When she checked the passenger manifest, she found that the general had also arranged for several trusted aides to accompany him on the trip. The evidence was mounting, but Elena knew she needed something more concrete before approaching the authorities. She decided to try to contact someone within Estanza's government who might have information about their meetings with General Vega. This was dangerous territory, as any contact with foreign officials during a time of military tension could be seen as suspicious. Elena used her journalism credentials to request an interview with Estanza's cultural attaché, claiming she was working on a story about improving relations between the two countries. During their meeting, she carefully probed for information about recent diplomatic activities. The attaché was guarded but did mention that there had been productive informal discussions with certain San Valdero military officials. While Elena pursued this angle, Maria made a disturbing discovery at the ministry. She found that General Vega had been systematically accessing personnel files for San Valdero's intelligence officers and special forces commanders. He now had detailed information about the country's most sensitive security personnel, including their identities, family members, and personal backgrounds. This information would be incredibly valuable to a foreign intelligence service planning an occupation. The two women met again that evening to share their findings. The picture that emerged was even more alarming than they had initially suspected. General Vega wasn't just planning to defect with military secrets. He was preparing to provide Estanza with everything they would need to completely dismantle San Valdero's security apparatus. Elena realized they needed help from someone with higher security clearance and more direct access to military intelligence. She reached out to Colonel Carmen Ruiz, a decorated officer who had previously exposed corruption within the military. Colonel Ruiz had a reputation for integrity and had been critical of some recent military decisions in background conversations with journalists. The meeting with Colonel Ruiz was tense. Elena presented the evidence carefully, emphasizing Maria's credentials and the thoroughness of their investigation. The colonel listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification about specific details. Her expression grew increasingly grim as the full scope of the alleged betrayal became clear. If what you're telling me is true, Colonel Ruiz said finally, this represents the most serious threat to national security in our country's history. But I need to verify this independently before taking any action. The accusations against General Vega are so serious that any mistake could destroy careers and potentially destabilize the entire military command structure. Colonel Ruiz agreed to conduct her own investigation, but warned that it would take time. She would need to access classified files and interview other officers without alerting General Vega or his supporters. Unfortunately, time was something they didn't have much of. The general's flight to Estanza was scheduled for the following Monday, only 4 days away. Over the weekend, Maria continued monitoring the general's activities through the ministry's computer systems. She discovered that he had accelerated several equipment transfers, moving even more sensitive military hardware toward the border. Most alarmingly, he had ordered the transfer of encryption codes and communication frequencies that would allow an invading force to monitor San Valdero's military communications in real time. Elena spent the weekend trying to verify the general's financial connections. She discovered that the foreign bank accounts she had identified were registered to companies with ties to Estanza's military-industrial complex. The money flowing into these accounts appeared to be payment for information and services that the general had already provided. On Sunday evening, Colonel Ruiz called Elena with urgent news. Her independent investigation had confirmed many of their suspicions. She had found evidence that General Vega had been in regular communication with Estanza's military intelligence service for several months. More importantly, she had discovered that Estanza was indeed planning a military operation against San Valdero, timed to coincide with the upcoming military exercise. "The situation is even worse than you suspected," Colonel Ruiz told Elena. "Our intelligence sources indicate that Estanza has been building up forces along our border for weeks. They're not just planning an invasion, they're planning a complete conquest. With General Vega's help, they believe they can take control of the entire country within 48 hours. The colonel explained that she had already begun alerting trusted officers within the military, but the process was delicate. General Vega had allies throughout the command structure, and moving too quickly could alert him to the investigation. They needed to time their actions carefully to prevent him from escaping to Estanza, while also ensuring that the military was prepared to defend against the planned invasion. Elena and Maria realized that their amateur investigation had uncovered a plot that could determine the fate of their entire nation. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, but they also felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. Two ordinary citizens, working with limited resources and taking enormous personal risks, had potentially saved their country from conquest. However, their work wasn't finished. General Vega was still free and still had access to classified information. His flight to Estanza was scheduled for the next morning, and if he made it across the border with the military secrets he had gathered, the invasion could proceed as planned. They needed to act quickly to ensure he never made it to that plane. Colonel Ruiz outlined the plan for Monday morning. She had arranged for a team of loyal military police to arrest General Vega at the airport, but the operation needed to be coordinated carefully to avoid creating a scene that might alert other conspirators. Elena would be present as a journalist to document the arrest, while Maria would remain at the ministry to monitor any last-minute attempts to transfer additional information. As they prepared for what could be the most important day in their country's recent history, all three women understood the magnitude of what they were attempting. If they succeeded, they would prevent a national catastrophe. If they failed, General Vega would escape, the invasion would proceed, and thousands of innocent people would suffer the consequences. The final phase of their mission was about to begin, and everything depended on executing their plan flawlessly in the next few hours. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected complication. Maria discovered that General Vega had moved his departure time from afternoon to early morning, apparently hoping to avoid detection. When she arrived at the ministry at dawn, she found that the general had already been there for hours, frantically accessing computer systems and downloading files onto portable storage devices. Maria immediately called Elena, who contacted Colonel Ruiz. The arrest team was still preparing for the afternoon operation, but now they needed to act within hours. Colonel Ruiz dispatched a small group of trusted military police to the ministry building, while she rushed to the airport to coordinate the main operation. At the ministry, Maria watched nervously as General Vega's activities became increasingly frantic. He was systematically accessing every database within his clearance level, copying enormous amounts of sensitive information. She realized he must have suspected that his plot had been discovered and was trying to gather as much intelligence as possible before fleeing the country. Maria made a crucial decision that would change everything. Rather than waiting for the military police to arrive, she decided to confront General Vega directly. She printed out copies of all the evidence she had gathered over the past week and walked to his office on the top floor of the ministry building. General Vega looked up in surprise when Maria knocked on his door. He had always been polite to the ministry staff, though distant and formal. She could see multiple computer screens displaying classified information and several portable storage devices connected to his workstation. "General," Maria said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I need to discuss some irregularities I've discovered in the logistics records." The general's expression immediately became suspicious. "What kind of irregularities, Miss Santos?" Maria placed the printed documents on his desk. Equipment transfers to unauthorized locations, communication with foreign officials outside normal diplomatic channels, and financial transactions that appear to be connected to foreign intelligence services. For a moment, General Vega's face showed complete shock. Then his expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Miss Santos. These matters are classified far above your security level." "I know you're planning to defect to Estanza," Maria replied firmly. "I know you've been providing them with military intelligence for months. And I know you're planning to help them invade our country during next week's military exercise." General Vega stood up slowly, his hand moving toward a desk drawer where Maria suspected he kept a weapon. "You're making very serious accusations without understanding the full situation. San Valdero is a small, weak country surrounded by larger, more powerful neighbors. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made to ensure survival." "Survival?" Maria's voice rose with anger. "You call betraying your own people survival. You call helping foreign soldiers invade our homeland survival. What about the thousands of innocent civilians who will die if Estanza conquers our country?" The general pulled a pistol from his desk drawer but didn't point it at Maria directly. "Estanza doesn't want to harm civilians. They want to integrate our territory peacefully into their nation. The transition will be much smoother with proper military cooperation." Maria realized that General Vega had somehow convinced himself that his betrayal was actually patriotic. "You really believe that?" she asked incredulously. "You think Estanza will treat our people kindly after they conquer us? You think foreign occupation is better than independence?" Before the general could respond, the office door burst open. Colonel Ruiz entered with 2 military police officers, their weapons drawn. "General Vega, you are under arrest for treason, espionage, and conspiracy against the state." What happened next unfolded in seconds. General Vega raised his pistol, but instead of pointing it at the officers, he aimed it at his own computer equipment. "If you arrest me, you'll never know the full extent of Estanza's invasion plans," he shouted. "I'm the only one who can provide you with details about their military strategy." Colonel Ruiz motioned for the officers to hold their positions. "General, put down the weapon and surrender peacefully. We can discuss any information you might have through proper legal channels." "It's too late for legal channels," General Vega replied desperately. "Estanza's forces are already in position. The invasion will begin with or without my cooperation. At least this way, I can help minimize the casualties." Maria stepped forward, despite the obvious danger. "General, you still have a choice. You can still be a hero instead of a traitor. Help us defend our country instead of helping our enemies conquer it." For a moment, General Vega's resolve seemed to waver. Maria could see conflict in his eyes as he struggled between his misguided loyalty to Estanza and whatever remained of his patriotism toward San Valdero. Then Elena burst into the room, accompanied by a team of government investigators she had summoned. "General Vega, we have documented evidence of your communications with Estanza intelligence services. We know about the financial payments you've received. We know about the military equipment you've repositioned to assist their invasion. It's over." The sight of so many people in his office seemed to break General Vega's composure completely. He began shouting about how they didn't understand the bigger picture, how San Valdero needed to be part of a larger nation to survive in the modern world. His words became increasingly incoherent as the reality of his situation sank in. Finally, Colonel Ruiz gave a signal to her officers. They moved quickly to disarm the general and place him under arrest. As they led him away in handcuffs, he continued protesting his innocence and claiming that history would vindicate his actions. With General Vega in custody, the team immediately began assessing the damage he had done and preparing defenses against the planned invasion. They discovered that he had provided Estanza with detailed maps of San Valdero's military installations, communication codes, and strategic plans. However, much of this information could be changed or neutralized now that they knew about the betrayal. Elena used her journalist contacts to begin spreading word about the thwarted plot, while Maria helped military technicians identify exactly which classified systems had been compromised. Colonel Ruiz coordinated with other loyal officers to prepare for the expected invasion and to identify any other potential conspirators within the military. The investigation revealed that General Vega had not been working entirely alone. Several junior officers had been providing him with information, though most appeared to have been unaware of his true intentions. A few higher-ranking officials had received suspicious payments from foreign sources and were arrested for further questioning. Most importantly, the team discovered that Estanza's invasion was scheduled to begin that very evening, coordinated with a planned communication blackout that would have prevented San Valdero's military from organizing an effective defense. With advance warning, Colonel Ruiz was able to position loyal forces to repel the invasion and maintain communication networks that General Vega's betrayal would have compromised. When Estanza's forces crossed the border that night, they found San Valdero's military ready and waiting. Instead of the confused and disorganized resistance they expected, they encountered a coordinated defense that had been prepared specifically to counter their invasion strategy. The battle was fierce but brief. Within 12 hours, the invading forces had been pushed back across the border with heavy casualties. In the aftermath, investigators discovered the full scope of General Vega's betrayal. He had been secretly working for Estanza for over a year, providing intelligence that had been used to plan not just the invasion, but a complete occupation strategy. Documents found in his possession revealed plans to install Estanza-controlled officials throughout San Valdero's government and to relocate significant portions of the population to make room for Estanza settlers. The revelation shocked the entire nation. General Vega had been one of the most respected figures in San Valdero's military, decorated for his service, and trusted with the country's most sensitive secrets. His betrayal represented one of the most serious intelligence failures in the nation's history. However, the swift action by Maria, Elena, and Colonel Ruiz had prevented a catastrophe. Military analysts later estimated that if the invasion had proceeded as planned, Estanza's forces could have conquered the entire country within days. Thousands of soldiers and civilians would have died in the fighting, and many more would have suffered under foreign occupation. Maria returned to her work at the ministry, but with new responsibilities overseeing security protocols for sensitive information. Elena wrote a series of articles about the thwarted invasion that won National Journalism Awards and helped expose other security vulnerabilities. Colonel Ruiz was promoted and tasked with reforming the military's intelligence and security procedures. Years later, when historians wrote about this period in San Valdero's history, they would identify the discovery of General Vega's plot as a turning point that preserved the nation's independence. The three women who had uncovered the conspiracy became national heroes, though they always insisted they had simply done their duty as citizens. General Vega was convicted of treason and sentenced to life imprisonment. During his trial, he continued to maintain that he had been trying to save San Valdero from inevitable conquest, but the evidence of his betrayal was overwhelming. The court rejected his claims of patriotic motivation and condemned his actions as the worst kind of treachery. The failed invasion marked the end of Estanza's aggressive expansion plans and led to a reorganization of regional security arrangements. Other neighboring countries, alarmed by the attempted conquest, formed new defensive alliances that helped stabilize the region for years to come. For Maria Elena and Colonel Ruiz, the experience had been both terrifying and profoundly meaningful. They had discovered that ordinary citizens working together with courage and determination could indeed change the course of history. Their actions had saved not just their own country, but potentially prevented a wider regional conflict that could have claimed tens of thousands of lives. The story of how a ministry clerk, a journalist, and a military officer had foiled one of the most dangerous plots in their nation's history became an inspiration for future generations. It demonstrated that vigilance, integrity, and civic courage were the ultimate safeguards of freedom and democracy.